What do you get when a man who spent years outrunning his past is forced to face it, live under the white-hot glow of Good Morning America? Outside, dawn is still stretching over Times Square. Inside the studio, everything gleams. The lights are too bright, the angles too perfect, the quiet too deliberate. Cameras purr. Makeup artists step away. Producers speak into earpieces in hushed code. A practiced stillness settles over the set, the kind that looks innocent but feels like the moment before a fuse is lit. Then the doors part and Mark Wahlberg walks in. Tailored jacket, crisp shirt, Boston swagger sanded down by 20 years of Hollywood discipline. He's got the handshake, the grin, the steady energy of someone who has done this 1,000 times. He's here to pitch a new action thriller, a violent, heart-pounding ride about grit and redemption. For Mark, this is supposed to be easy. Chat, smile, clip goes viral, on to the next city. Across the set, George Stephanopoulos sits behind his desk, notes arranged in tidy stacks like a case file. His expression is pleasant. His eyes are cooler. He rises with the famous network's smile, the one that fades just before it reaches the edges. "Mark, welcome back to Good Morning America," he says, voice smooth as glass. "Thanks for having me, George." "Always good to be here," Mark answers, sliding into the familiar rhythm, warm but guarded, open but not exposed. Hands are shaken. Lenses settle. The red tally light blooms. On the control room monitors, the picture is flawless. Two pros trading pleasantries under soft morning light. And yet something in the room is off. The air feels too still. The smiles hold a fraction too long. The pauses come a hair late. Behind the glass, a producer flashes a small cue. George glances down at his cards for a beat that means more than it looks. Mark doesn't see the cue, but he feels the shift, the way a boxer senses a feint. He sits, angles to the main camera, posture impeccable, but a hint of tension grips his shoulders, the old Boston survival instincts whispering that this may not be the easy lap he expected. George crosses one leg, pen in hand. The early questions are gentle, co-stars' stunts, the film's big theme. Mark answers with the well-rehearsed ease of a man who's told this story, or one like it, many times. The crew nods. The small audience laughs at the right moments. But under the chatter, a faint hum builds, like static crawling across the skin before a storm. A camera operator trades a quick look with the floor manager. A producer in back folds her arms. Nobody says it out loud, but everyone knows. The room is about to turn. Mark leans back and flashes the grin that's disarmed rooms for decades. "You know, George, this movie is really about second chances." George's smile tightens by a millimeter. His fingers tap once against his cards. Outside, the city wakes. Horns, sirens, engines. Inside, the sound is a distant rumor. Mark laughs at a line. The laugh doesn't reach his eyes. The heaviness arrives, subtle, unmistakable. To the folks watching with coffee at home, it's any other upbeat morning interview. To the people on set, it feels like a courtroom where the jury just walked in. The first minutes glide on rails. Question, answer, smile, chuckle. Then George leans forward, softens his tone, and slips a blade into velvet. "Mark," he says, almost casual, "since we're talking about redemption, let's talk about your past." The air changes temperature. The camera's hum becomes a roar against the bones. Mark blinks. The smile lingers, then freezes. He's heard this pivot before, but not like this, not live, not with no commercial break in sight. "Specifically," George goes on, measured and calm, "let's talk about the incidents from your youth. The ones some people say you've never fully addressed." For half a heartbeat, Mark doesn't move. Then he smooths his jacket, a reflex. His jaw tightens. His tongue pushes against his back teeth. "George," he says evenly, "I thought we were here to talk about the new film." A long, controlled beat. "We will," George replies, unfazed. "But don't you think the public deserves more on how you've made amends for those mistakes?" Mistakes. The word lands with weight. Mark inhales slowly through his nose. He knows the media playbook. He knows how to defuse a grenade. "I've talked about my past many times," he says, level and steady. "I was a kid who made terrible choices. I've spent my adult life trying to make things right." George nods politely, not persuaded. Tap. "But Mark, some people say talking isn't enough." that maybe you haven't truly taken full responsibility. Something hairline and invisible cracks. The smile fades. The muscles in Mark's jaw flex. The camera glides a notch closer, close enough to catch the flicker behind his eyes. Floor manager signals keep rolling. No break, no cut. With all due respect, George, I've owned what I did, Mark says, leaning in now. The consonants sharpen. The Boston edge shows. I've apologized. I've worked with victims. I try to do better every day. George doesn't give ground. Still, he says, soft but surgical, these weren't harmless teenage pranks. Real people were hurt. Isn't there more you could do? We're past interview and into cross-examination. Mark's hands clamp the chair arms. His knuckles blanch. He slows his breathing on purpose. In the control room, a voice whispers, "He's pushing too hard." Another replies, "Don't touch it." This is TV gold. The warmth drains from Mark's expression. Focus slides in cold clear. He understands. The lights and lenses aren't here to promote a movie. They're here to put him on the stand. I've been open for years, he says, voice lower. I've said what needed to be said. I was a kid who made terrible mistakes. I've spent my whole life trying to make it right. George doesn't blink. That's the thing, he says, edging forward. What you call mistakes, others call crimes. It's not about perfect phrasing. It's about whether you've truly taken responsibility. The line hits flush. Mark exhales, measured. I take responsibility every single day, he says, feeling the heat rise under the words. I've owned it. I've apologized. I've given back. I've worked with kids like me, kids who need a second chance. George tilts his head. That isn't the same as accountability, is it? Some would say it's damage control, polishing the image after the fact. A soft ripple passes through the crew. The camera tightens again. A small tremor flutters at the corner of Mark's mouth. A muscle ticks in his temple. You think this is about image? He lets out a short, humorless breath. You think I spent 30 years doing charity for headlines? George doesn't answer. He waits, pen taps once. Silence becomes leverage. Listen, Mark says, the voice roughening. I've never run from my past. I've talked in interviews and docs with the people I hurt. I've worked my ass off to be better. I'm not that kid anymore. George's reply lands like the bang of a gavel. But the victims, do you ever think about what they're still living with? What it's like to carry scars while you live in a Beverly Hills mansion? The flash in Mark's eyes is instant. I think about it every damn day. The words are crisp, controlled. You think I don't? You think it doesn't haunt me? The exchange is a duel now. Each line is a strike. Each pause a chambering of the next round. The lights burn hotter. A sheen of sweat gathers on Mark's forehead. Across the country, viewers lean forward, the clink of spoons and coffee mugs forgotten. The segment has slipped its leash. This is no longer morning TV. This is judgment. So, George presses, firm now, you've grown. You've changed. Tell me, does time erase accountability? Does success cancel out what you did? Mark's shoulders lift. Breath quickens. I've paid for it, he says louder. I've paid for it 1,000 times over. You don't know what it's like to wake up with that every morning. George's eyes narrow. Maybe not, but I know 45 days in jail doesn't sound like justice to a lot of people. The sentence hits like a steel door slamming. Silence, true silence. Mark stares. His mouth opens, then doesn't find words. His face tightens. The eyes go dark. Something dangerous rolls across his expression like thunder over water. He doesn't speak. The stillness stretches, 1 second too long, then 2. And everyone in the building knows the point of control just slid past. The phrase clangs in his head, 45 days. Justice. 45 days. Justice. He pushes back from the chair. The metal legs shriek over the floor. The seat tips, clatters into the backdrop. Heads jerk up. Color rushes into his face. The mask is gone. Are you out of your mind? He snaps. Pure Boston now. You think I haven't paid enough? You think I haven't spent 30 damn years paying for it? The sound bounces off walls and finds every microphone. George doesn't flinch. He stays seated a heartbeat longer, voice steady. Call it justice, he says. That's what people want, Mark. Real accountability. Justice. Mark fires back. You want justice? I've lived with this every day since I was 17. I've worked with at-risk kids. I've given millions to help people climb out of the same hole I did. I've tried to prove you can change, no matter where you start. 2 security guards slide a step forward, then stop. You sit there in your suit, Mark's voice shakes the air, judging me like I haven't owned up. I was a kid, George. A stupid, broken, angry kid. I didn't know better. And I've spent 3 decades trying to be better. Isn't that the point of redemption? George watches, unreadable, then twists the knife with precision. Redemption is earned, Mark, not bought. You can't donate your way out of guilt. You can't purchase someone else's pain. The shot lands. Mark steps closer, jaw locked, hands trembling, not with fear, but with the strain of holding back. That's not what I'm doing, he says, voice low and hard. This isn't PR, this is my life. Every day I make sure I'm not that person. And yet, here we are again, George replies, tone cool. Maybe the issue isn't if you've changed. Maybe it's that you can't face what you did without making it about you. That does it. Mark's head lifts. His eyes burn. When he speaks again, his voice has dropped, quieter, tighter, more dangerous. You think you know me? You have no idea. The studio feels smaller. Even the cameras seem to hold their breath. The red light pulses. Mark steps back, rubs his face, chest rising and falling. Years of public judgment, every headline, every interview, press into this one moment. George goes in once more. If you truly carry that guilt, why not reach out to your victims directly? Why keep it public instead of personal? The question hangs there like smoke nobody can wave away. The vulnerability drains from Mark's face. It leaves something cold, precise. Because, George, he says quietly, it isn't that simple. I don't get to pick up the phone and say sorry. The world doesn't allow that. George waits. My lawyers, my agents, my publicists, they've warned me for decades not to, Mark continues. If I reach out, it turns into lawsuits, headlines, a circus. The system doesn't want healing. It wants ratings. It wants control. So the system is to blame? George asks, clinical. Others kept you from making real amends? Mark lets out a breath that isn't quite a laugh. I'm saying the world doesn't care about forgiveness. It wants a villain it can point to. I've lived long enough to know that. Silence settles again. Confession, meeting, skepticism. Regret colliding with judgment. Deep down, Mark knows the bitter truth. No matter how much he says, even when it's real, some people will never let him be forgiven. George shifts to the final blade. So what you're really saying is Hollywood protected you, built a wall so you didn't face full consequences. Mark's face freezes, then darkens. Disbelief sparks. Fury follows. His palm slams the chair arm. The crack ricochets through the set. Someone in the booth gasps. That is not what I said, he roars. Don't twist my words. It sounds exactly like that, George returns, icy calm. Your team kept you from real amends. That is protection. You're unbelievable, Mark says, stepping into the space between them. You don't care about truth. You want a show. This isn't journalism, it's character assassination. He smacks the desk. George's mug rattles. Tiny sound, enormous meaning. George stands. Now they're eye to eye under unforgiving light, one face flushed with anger, the other set like stone. This isn't an ambush, George says, clipped. It's an interview. If hard questions are too much, maybe you shouldn't be here. Mark releases a dry, bitter laugh. You call this journalism? You got me here under false pretenses, so you could humiliate me live. Congratulations, George. You got your big moment. A camera operator eases backward. A PA whispers, "Do we cut?" No answer. Instinct says keep it. History's happening. You think this is noble? Mark's voice lowers, edges frayed. You're feeding the outrage machine, using my past so people can feel better about theirs. George's expression doesn't move. Or maybe, he says softly, I'm asking what others won't. Maybe people deserve to see who you really are. Something in Mark's face finally gives. The anger collapses into exhaustion. He shakes his head, the fight draining away. Maybe you're right, he says, barely above a whisper. Maybe I don't belong here anymore. Maybe I don't belong anywhere. The room is so quiet the air conditioner feels loud. Maybe you shouldn't, George says. Mark doesn't move for a long breath. The color has left his face. Only his eyes still burn. He looks at George, then straight down the lens. The Hollywood shine is gone. No mask, no charm. Just a man standing where his own legend used to be. He reaches to his collar, peels off the wireless mic. Static crackles in the speakers. He tosses it to the desk. It bounces once and lands against George's notes with a small final sound, like a gavel. "You got what you wanted," he says, voice rough. "The scandal. The ratings. A piece of my soul. Congratulations." George opens his mouth, but the reply doesn't come in time. Mark turns away. His chair still lies on its side, a quiet monument to everything that tipped over. The crew stays frozen. Cameras keep rolling. In the booth, a voice tries again. "Go to commercial." No one moves. Security steps forward. Mark waves them off with a tired flick of the hand. "Don't worry," he says. "I'm leaving." He walks out into the hallway's bright light. The studio doors close behind him with a soft thud that sounds, in that moment, like the end of an era. George inhales, squares his papers, hands trembling just enough to betray the cost. He looks into the lens and finds the anchor voice. "We'll be right back," he says quietly. Go to commercial. The red light dies. The set hums and cools. Outside, the clip is already everywhere. Timelines, headlines, commentary. Hashtags burst. Think pieces bloom. Some call it courage. Others call it a meltdown. Everyone watches. On the sidewalk, Mark steps into full daylight. The city swallows him, traffic, footsteps, voices. He squints, eyes distant, face drawn. For the first time all morning, he isn't performing. He looks oddly peaceful, in a bruised human way, stripped down, wounded, free. He takes one long, shaky breath and disappears into the crowd. Back on the set, the silence lingers like smoke. And as the replays roll and the arguments ignite, one question hangs over all of it.